There's a data point in your funnel that tells you exactly when someone is going to be a bad fit for your business, and you might be passing it over day after day. In this video, we're going to go over that top negative signal and why on the surface you might feel like you understand it, but there's deeper and deeper levels to it that can really tell you about your entire funnel and all of your prospects coming in. So let's get into it. Hey everyone, I'm Dan Saavedra from MergeYourData, and we are on day 40 of the 90-day YouTube sprint on signal analytics. And today we're going to be going over the top negative signal in your funnel. And so I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I'm going to tell you exactly what that negative signal is, and it is churn. But before you click away on this video, let's think a little bit more about what churn is and how it can actually indicate whether or not you should stop selling to someone at the very front of your funnel, of your customer journey. Do you know when churn is actually indicative of whether or not someone is going to be a bad fit? People churn for a lot of reasons, but this is the top negative signal that you can use to determine whether or not someone is a good fit for your company's product or services. And so we're going to go into those details and exactly how you can use the top negative signal of churn to understand the customer journey better and avoid failure in the future. And so let's jump into it here. We're going to talk about how this came up in the first place. We were looking across all of our clients' accounts, and we saw that when there was churn problems, there were specific patterns across these companies and these people that were churning. Oh, sorry, that's in my throat. And so what we did was we cross-referenced a bunch of data points with these churned accounts, and we saw what the common criteria was, and then walked our way back to see when we can exclude them or include them from our customer journey. And so we're going to get into the details of how we did that here. Think about churn. Think about how you've handled it in the past, how you've thought of it. You want to prevent it at all costs. But are you actually being proactive, using the data of churn to prevent more of that from happening? Obviously, you can always look inward, right? But we're going to go into other portions of churn that will get you a better, fuller picture. And so what it is, churn, it's a nice little picture of a lady churning some butter here, is when people are no longer doing business with you, right? It's pretty simple. But there are a lot of reasons why they're not doing business with you anymore, which we're going to go into in the next slide. But when you're thinking of churn, what are you thinking about? What does it tell you? Are you just thinking that it's a bad thing that happens? Are you thinking that it's something that you've done wrong? Are you thinking that it's because that client was a jerk? Or you think that it was a bad fit in the first place? What are you thinking about with churned customers? So I encourage you to think about that as I switch to the next slide. This next slide is one that we've been going over. It's a diagram we use often. And we're going to talk about why and when churn is a signal. And so if we're looking at this diagram, we can see that there are 4 components going into a signal: conversion optimization, conversion rates, attribution, unit economics, the financial performance of the person who you're collecting the data point on, of the company, of the deal, dimensional data. So this is firmographic, demographic, behavioral information. And all of those combined equal a signal. And so when we're thinking about churn, we need to keep all of these in mind. This is a more wholesome picture, right? We can use attribution and dimensional data to exclude certain people in the top of the funnel or the beginning of the customer journey if they meet certain criteria of people who have bad unit economics because they churn too early and who do not convert and stay as customers. Part of the unit economics and dimensional data spheres here also includes the results that you get for your clients if you are a service. If you're a product, based business, it's going to look very different. Churn is also going to look very different, right? You're going to have a different definition of churn if you are selling things in a project format or have a one-time sale, right? And so you'll have to look at your data and understand what churn means. Is there a specific lifetime of your product or of your project that you then should lead to another sale? If you don't reach that next sale, is that considered churn? You have to define these things, right? But when we look at all these points, data points that make up a signal, we can tell when a churn is an actual signal that we should be excluding people from the front of the customer journey. And that's because the unit economics didn't work out. They churned too early. They were a bad fit. They were unhappy with the results. You didn't get results. They got too good of results where they didn't need you anymore, right? So there's a lot of things that go into signals in general with churn. And so we go back to this equation again and again. Data plus action plus result equals signal. Red result here is what's highlighted. I don't know why I said it like that. The result portion of the equation is red here because that's what we want to pay attention to. The result is critical. When we're thinking about churn, before we even get into whether or not it was a good or bad churn, we need to think of the result both from the client's perspective and from our own perspective, right? And so the result would include data points around their acquisition cost, the amount of money we collected from them, how long they were there. But it also has to do with how much money they made from our service, whether or not there was a measurable impact. What was the client's experience and result from the service or product that you sold to them, right? And so that result part of the equation can be broken up into both the perspective of your client and yourself. And that's where you get a lot of power. Because it leads us to this. This is when it's the top negative signal. This is how we're going to go through and understand whether or not we should be paying attention to this churn data point. And so there's three main questions that we use to analyze and understand whether it's the top negative signal. 1, are you getting them results? 2, are they using your product service correctly? 3, is there a good reason to continue being a customer for them? And so we'd go through each one of these and understand, okay, are we getting them results? If the answer is no, is that because we had an internal issue where we did not perform as expected or our product didn't perform as expected? Was there some type of misalignment with the messaging and the promises that were made compared to what was actually delivered? And then if the answer is no, and we have some internal issue, then we know it's not a negative signal for the customer journey. We shouldn't be excluding people who match the same demographics and firmographics of the people who are churning from continuing on with our sales team, right? Instead, we're going to look internally and we're going to fix those problems, right? Let's say we are getting them results though. So the answer is yes. Why would they be churning if we are getting them results? And so there are several answers to that possibly. But if we're getting them results, then we know that they are a good fit because our product or service is performing correctly, right? And so it might be a communication issue. It might be something else. The only other out there thing that we don't see too often, but it happens sometimes, is we're getting them results, but they're just never happy, right? It could be a specific industry that you just don't work well with. They're just never appreciative of the results that you're actually getting them. Maybe it's worth it to communicate with them differently or try to point out exactly what types of returns and results they're getting from your product or service. But ultimately, it might be a negative signal. You might have to exclude people in a specific industry, raising specific money, having a certain number of employees or a certain company structure, whatever it may be. You might have a negative signal there with the churn, and it would be a very strong one. But if you're not getting them results and it's not an internal problem, then that would be an incredibly strong negative signal. You should exclude those people from the front of your customer journey, the top of your funnel. You shouldn't be spending a bunch of time trying to convert them because clearly you cannot get them results. And so they are a bad fit, right? And a lot of people don't look at this results portion. They only look at the conversion portion and whether or not they churned. But you have to go a level deeper. You have to look at whether or not your product or service is matching the expectations that were promised and actually providing results, right? And then churn is a top negative signal. And so you can do the same thing with number 2. Are they using your product or service correctly? No. Is it an internal thing? Is it something that they just like can't figure out because of whatever their background is, whatever their specific demographic or firmographic breakdown is? If it's a yes, then why would they be churning if they're getting results and they're using your product or service correctly? There's something else going on. There's some type of communication missing, right? There's some type of process missing from your side. So we do the same thing. Are they using your product or service correctly? No, because they just never were able to pick up your tool or your product and use it. And no matter how much training you give them, they're never, ever getting it. Then we know it's a top negative signal. Those people are going to churn. You should exclude them from the front of the customer journey, from the top of the funnel. They're just not a good fit. So it's your top negative signal, right? Look at the firmographics, the demographics, the behaviors that they're taking on, and see if you can exclude those people from your sales team time, because otherwise you're just creating unprofitable customers and wasting everyone's resources, right? If they are using your product or service correctly, answer is yes. It's not a negative signal that you should be forcing people out of the front of your customer journey. 3, is there a good reason to continue being a customer? Same exact breakdown. No, then you have some type of offer or upsell or expansion issue here. Because if there's not a good reason to continue being a customer, why would they keep paying you? It's not a churn. So by definition, that's not people churning. For us, we don't consider that churn. We just consider them done with our service or product, right? So your definition might be wrong there. But if you are doing some type of recurring charge and then people are canceling that, but there's not a good reason to continue being a customer, then you need to look internally and see how you can provide them more value with a continued relationship, right? Or you can just accept it as a fact that this is their customer lifetime and this is their average value, and that's okay. We just know these people are going to churn after this amount of time. If there is a good reason to continue being a customer and they still churned, then it's most likely an internal issue or a communication issue, and that should be addressed. And so with this last one, it usually isn't a top negative signal, no matter what answer they give. Sometimes it is if there's a very specific situation where people have a great reason to be a customer, they've got results, they've used your product or service correctly. Maybe it's a macroeconomic factor, right? A specific industry, it's just declining. And it's not easy to keep them on board because other priorities are above whatever your product or service provides. And so that might be a top negative signal that there's a specific industry that even though everything is done correctly and you're getting exactly what you want for your clients, they're still churning because ultimately they're making less and less money and priorities have shifted, right? And so that can still be a top negative signal, that churn. And so then we need to look at the cross-reference data points, exclude them from the front of the customer journey, the top of the funnel. And so in general, most of these questions could indicate an internal issue or that they're a bad fit. You must dive deeper, and then you will get your top negative signal. Yes to those questions could indicate you have a communication issue, right? So you are getting them results and they're churning. They are using your product or service correctly and they're churning. There is a good reason to continue being a customer. You probably have a communication issue. We talked about the one situation with just an industry that's shrinking, where a yes could mean that it's still a negative signal that you need to pay attention to. So that's the meat and potatoes in general, how to handle it. Use signal analytics, reverse engineer common characteristics about churned clients so that you understand them. Use that combination of data points to understand why they churned and who to exclude in the beginning. 2, verify they aren't churning for a reason that you should be addressing. You need to look inward. Understand if it's something that your company and your team is doing poorly. 3, automatically downsell or disqualify people who fit the negative signal. This is the strongest signal if their unit economics aren't working out and they're converting still. That means they're wasting the most amount of time and resources for your company, and they're still not making you money. That's worse than someone who just fills out a form and then never converts, because you're going to spend way more resources in sales converting them to a one customer, onboarding, customer support, and then all the backlash around brand and possible negative reviews if they do churn and for some reason leave a negative review for you. And so you want to automatically downsell or disqualify people from even getting to that step. And that's why this is the top negative signal. Churn is the top negative signal because you wasted the most resources and will continue to if you're only looking at whether or not they converted to a customer. If you're not considering churn at all, you're actually missing one of the most critical data points that you are getting. You need to pay attention to this. Otherwise, you will be burning cash on people who are not worth your time, and you're taking all of your resources away from your best customers. That's the sum of this. This client results, I think I put in the wrong screenshot here. There was another one that I wanted to put in, and we've used it on past videos, but basically 5 months after we 5 months after we launched Signal Analytics, we stopped this churn by understanding who were bad fits in the first place. And you could see the recurring revenue all of a sudden just ramp up. And so that's what Signal Analytics can do in this situation. It shows you exactly what the top negative signal is and prevents you from all of the hurt and pain of closing new customers, but churning so many that your revenue stays flat and your team is focused on the wrong people trying to keep them on board. That is all. Take one action. Like the video, please. Helps with the algorithm. Next video will be a surprise. Subscribe on YouTube or via the link in the description for our Signal Constructor tool. I'm Dan Saavedra from MergeYourData. Thanks for watching.